Welcome to the Singularity Lab, your home for futurism, breaking technology, scientific exploration, and UAP discoveries. Join the conversation with expert guests on a unique journey that explores the limits of human innovation, evolution, and imagination.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Singularity Lab, the show where we explore the intersection of society, culture, and human evolution through the latest advancements in science and technology. Thank you so much for joining us today as we help you navigate the exciting and rapidly changing landscape of technology and its impact on society. Joining me today is Brooks Lopez. He is a program planner in the defense industry. His degrees in psychology and focus on neuroscience and learning and memory. Brooks, how the heck are you today?
I'm doing great. A little bit better than last week, I should say.
Better than last week. So I totally respect and appreciate that. And you're here to bring it today, huh?
I certainly am.
Awesome. It's great to have you all today. Simon Fly, good to see you. Jazz Shaw, the Breeders Syndicate, Matthew Riot in the house, Night Gazer, Simon Fly, Arlene. Great to have you all here today. Aaron Desario, amazing to have you here. We've got a lot to cover today. We're going to be talking about China's new test, their Stirling engine. For those of you who aren't familiar with thermoelectric converters, you're going to learn about them a little bit today. We're going to dig into the U.S. intelligence leaks. We're going to talk about Global AGI. The Debrief had an amazing article by, I believe, Christopher Plain this week or last week about how we enable global artificial intelligence and whether that is a good or a bad thing. We're going to be talking about DARPA's new reverse engineering program, robots and chat GPT4. It's a lot to cover, Brooks.
It's so much, but it's going to keep growing every single week.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And that's kind of the reason that we wanted to do this show as we're doing it. We want to cover what's going on as we march toward the technological singularity. We want to figure out what's going on in the meantime. You know, I think we should be a part of that process. What do you think, Brooks?
Oh, I'm all about it.
Super. All right. Well, our AI, Randy, is going to share an article on the screen right now about China's new test for their Stirling engine. NASA's also looking into Stirling engines for deep space. Brooks, you want to give a quick, can you give a quick breakdown on what a Stirling thermoelectric converter is and why it's valuable to the Chinese as well as NASA?
Absolutely. So this is a really cool piece of technology. What this does is it takes usually something as an output from a small nuclear reactor, which would be heat, and takes that heat and allows a piston or forces a piston to revolve, pushing magnets through a series of electrical coils that generates electricity, an electrical field that we pull electricity from. And as that happens, it actually has such a small amount of energy input to output that it's a lot more effective than things like solar, wind, some of the other things that we could potentially use in extraterrestrial spaces.
So let me ask you this, because I think this is when I was reading the article, I was going to Chat GPT and trying to understand what a Stirling thermoelectric converter was, and from what I understand, it was actually created by the Chinese first. NASA is now starting to test some similar technologies, but it's not as if it still requires a power source, right? So that power source could technically be solar, right? Or on Earth, it could be wind, it could be nuclear, but the beauty of it is that it converts electricity with very minimal very minimal
loss, very minimal resistance, so very minimal power loss. And so what you're really looking at here is something that's going to take a heat source. So that's the thermo part of the equation. And I am not totally familiar with who developed the Stirling engine to begin with. Now, the Chinese have done the first physical proof of concept.
Right.
But I don't know that it was originally Chinese. That being said, what's really different about this than a traditional nuclear reactor is you get a lot of loss for what you put out.
Right.
And heat to electricity is not something that we're great about. Combustion is what we use the most common, right? We burn gasoline, we blow up gasoline and allow it to move pistons back and forth. But with that, there's a lot of heat. There's a lot of entropy in the system, right? That reduces what our energy input is versus what our energy output is. The Stirling engine, Stirling mechanism, technology, if you will, reduces that to something that, if it's used in like a deep space scenario, in the long run, you have something that's very, very efficacious over a long period of time.
Right. So this idea, if we were to simplify this, I'm getting some feedback on the chat here that they'd like some simplification or some cannabis. One of the two would be helpful in understanding this technology, but maybe let's try both. Go ahead and enable the cannabis while we try to simplify this. Would it be fair, Brooks, to say instead of pistons, you're simply using magnets or something similar to that? Would that be a way to simplify this machine?
Very similar. So you're pushing magnets. So one of the things that's very unique about the electromagnetic existence is that if you move magnets through an electrical field, or you move an electrical field through magnets, you create energy by proxy. So if you were to fly a plane towards magnetic north that just so happened to have a pole running across it that was magnetic, any moving magnets through an electrical field creates energy. Now that's a very small equation, like a very very small amount.
Okay.
But what you would be looking at for this is taking something that's in like the kilowatt power range on a nuclear reactor, so a small nuclear reactor, taking the thermo output on, so the heat output of it, and pushing similar pistons around like you would on a combustion engine, but this time with magnets that are going to increase that change of polarity through an electric field that increases its own energy output. So you're getting I won't call it a twofold. I honestly don't know what the return is, but it's much higher than what you would even have on like a modern car engine.
Got it. So what's the purpose of all this? Is it just to be able to create or to generate energy in deep space, or are we talking what's the long-term strategy of the Chinese, and then what is the U.S. going to be doing to counter this, or not counter it, but like why are they working on it, and will the U.S. be using it for the same reasons?
So I think that that's an excellent question. I think one of the big things to look at here is what those goals are. So the moon is a big thing. Both the Chinese Space Agency as well as NASA and even the European Space Agency has said that the moon is very much in the next couple years. We're going to need nuclear reactors on the moon. We're going to need large nuclear reactors for things like creating a potential power grid, but we're going to need small nuclear reactors for things like excavators that go outside our traditional grid. If we put a small nuclear reactor on an excavating vehicle, just as a hypothetical, and it goes out into somewhere on the further, distances of the moon, and it has one of these Stirling engines on it, it's going to get a lot more output from the reactor than just the heat that it produces.
Got it. Okay.
You're taking what you're producing and you're making it just extend longer, if that makes sense.
It does. And so basically the idea is are we in competition with China going to the moon? Are we working in cooperation? Is this a mix between competition and cooperation? Like, because the weird thing that I still struggle to understand, for example, is how we can be in a geopolitical proxy war with Russia, yet still be working in an international space station together. So it's always very confusing when you're looking at, the geopolitics of Earth and then the cooperation we see in space. Do we know if this is if they're working in tandem with the U.S. government, or is this completely separate? This is a race to the moon. This is a race to have energy on the moon and to build bases.
This is definitely going to be a new space race, and we know that for one reason. In specific, the Chinese have created their own international. Well, it's not international; their own space station, right? The Tianjin-3, is that what it's called? I believe.
I think so. Let's see.
And I'll be honest, my Mandarin's not great, so if I mispronounce it, I do apologize.
Probably Tianjin-3 is the name of their national space station.
Tianjin-3, and it's a space station, but it's not international. As far as I'm aware, only Chinese astronauts have gone there at this point in time. Now, our shared space with the Russians in the International Space Station has obviously been jeopardized by what's going on in the Ukraine right now.
Okay, interesting. So this is one of the things that is quite fascinating about this space race, is that not only are the Chinese looking to go to the moon and build their own bases, they're also building their own space station, but their goal is to send crewed crewed
Mars, right?
missions to Mars by 2033. So this is going to be this new space race is definitely something that's coming into tangible form very, very quickly. And I can only imagine the speed at which it increases as the technology increases exponentially over the coming months and years.
Very much so. And I think that what they've done is they picked the milestone off of NASA's charts, which is 2033, and just said, we're going to meet it or beat it. And what that does, I mean, that's literally a space race, right? Like, we now have a 10-year race to crewed missions on Mars.
Let's see if we can respond to this sent by Jazz Shaw. He says, moving a conductor through a magnetic field induces a current in the conductor. It's the basis of all generators. This sounds like something totally different. Do you have any insight on that?
So I think it's very similar. My understanding for this was that the basis of it was how it utilizes the output of the heat from the reactor to utilize the pistons that would be pushed through the moving magnet, which would create a magnetic field. And by proxy, it would allow us to generate a second and maybe even a tertiary system or series of electrical fields while still using the initial heat production instead of just like turning a rotor.
Okay, so thank you for explaining it on the college level. I asked GPT to explain it on the fifth grade level. So let's see if it's different. All right. So, well, sometimes we can create electricity by using a special kind of device called a thermoelectric converter. The device works by using something called the Seebeck effect, which means that if you heat up one side of a certain material, it will create a flow of electricity to the other side of the material. Now, the Stirling thermoelectric converter is a specific type of thermoelectric converter that uses a special engine called a Stirling engine. So it sounds to me like it's just a different type of engine that powers this beast.
So I don't know it's necessarily different. The engine itself, I don't know, is much different, right? A normal combustion engine uses heat to move pistons, but typically we use that to just turn a turbine, if you will. But that turbine for us tends to be the axles in our car, right?
Right.
So in this, it would be turning a turbine that would it would be moving pistons. Instead of turning just a turbine, it would be moving magnets through an electrical field, yes, magnets through an electrical coil, which would create an additional magnetic and electrical field.
And heat, right. Ultimately electricity,
and
right?
Ultimately electricity, which for the most part for us is always going to end up being heat. And as long as you have a way to capture it, then you're good.
Good. What are your thoughts on, I mean, okay, let's look at the meta outlook for this new space race. Is it as simple as we're the first country to gain higher ground? Is that an advantage, or like what's the long-term strategy, do you think, coming from the Chinese and the US when it comes to developing these bases on the moon?
I definitely think that a lot of it's going to be moving forward with a beachhead, right? So if you have a beachhead on the moon, you have access to certain chemicals that are not chemicals, certain elements that we are starting to run out of here. Hydrogen's a big one of them, and so is helium, right? Helium, especially, I think, in the short term, we
could harvest more helium on the moon than we could on the Earth. Is that the idea?
My understanding is that there are potential, and I'm not sure how much research has gone into this, but my understanding is there are potential pockets of helium on the moon that we could absolutely harvest, right? And we use this for a lot of medical technology. The other big thing is that the moon has a much lower gravity than Earth does, and certainly doesn't have the atmosphere that Earth does. So it's a great launch point for other space vehicles.
Right.
And if you happen to be the guy that's up there that has a launch pad, or maybe it's even not a launch pad, maybe it's a runway of some kind, because you don't have the need to create such gigantic propulsion to create escape velocity, you could launch from the moon during certain times of the year to go to another planet, to go to the asteroid belt, to go to the moons of Jupiter, Saturn, wherever you wanted to go.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The low G of the moon gives you a greater ability to launch into the solar system with less fuel, ultimately, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Your energy output is significantly less, orders of magnitude less from the surface of the moon than it is from Earth.
Got it. Fantastic. So let's move on to our next piece here. And I think this is Oh man. All right. So we do cover, though this is a science and tech show, we do cover technology when it comes to modern warfare, geopolitics. So I wanted to take a peek into this leaked Pentagon intelligence that came through none other than Discord. For those of you who are not familiar with this particular app, it is a way for people to chat and to converse. We have our own Discord channel for the Singularity Lab. Feel free to pop in there. The link is in the description below. But I thought it was fascinating. So let me just give a little context. If you haven't been following this story, one of the interesting things about this story was that the papers, these are physical papers that were crumpled up and then photographed and then posted onto Discord. And they range anywhere from speaking about the current state of the Ukraine-Russian war, all the way to how the U.S. spies on our own foes and allies. Really interesting story. A lot of frustration in the in the international community when it comes to both our allies of the U.S. as well as Russia and China, who are not allies of the U.S. Can you talk a little bit about, Brooks, what your initial thoughts were as you saw this news breaking?
So as I kind of looked at this, at first I thought, wow, how on earth would we allow something like this to happen? And I've got a hot take for you here.
Okay.
I'm going to go with Operation Mincemeat Part 2.
I don't have any idea what that means, but I'm really excited to hear you out here.
So Operation Mincemeat is something that was created and put together by one of the greatest sources of intelligence in the history of warfare, which was the UK intelligence. This was done as a predecessor to the storming of the beaches of Normandy to ensure that Hitler and the other Nazi leaders really had no idea what was happening. This is in conjunction with several other operations, but the big one here was they used a cadaver that they had found. Created an officer, put him through all the ledgers that never existed, and planted papers on him so that when his body was found, they were believed to be official intelligence.
Okay.
What this particular intelligence at the time for Operation Mincemeat was it was the belief, or it was the predicated belief that there's no way we could hit Germany from France. The only way we could do it was through Italy. So we would land in maybe Sardinia, probably one of the other islands, but we would make a feint so they would believe we were coming through Sicily.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, as history will dictate, we never attacked Sardinia, certainly not Sicily.
Right.
But the whole time, the German forces, Himmler and a lot of the others, were really terrified of an attack coming up through Italy, that they would not commit the resources they needed to protect Normandy or any of the other French beaches, specifically not the Normandy itself, because the English had a blow-up tank regiment set up on the other face of the United Kingdom. So they really thought an amphibious attack would potentially come from a different direction. The UK intelligence has been on top of this for, at least 60 years, maybe a lot more. But in my mind, someone finding crumpled up papers that a picture comes out, and even the international frustration here could be just really, really good soap opera stuff.
So you think this could potentially be theatrics, political theatrics? Because that was the biggest thing. That was the original thing that I would, because I saw, because there was the hand wringing, right? There was the Koreans who were upset about this. There were
so
Europeans who were, let's talk a little bit about that, because the Koreans, one of the things that they have, I believe it's in their constitution, or it's one of their laws, that they cannot supply ammo during a live fight. They are not, it's against their either constitution or one of their laws to supply ammo during a live fight. And the U.S. has been putting pressure supposedly on Korea to help support the proxy war, as it were, in Ukraine, and they wouldn't do it. And so part of this leaked information was saying how the U.S. was trying to put pressure on them to do so. And there's a lot of different pieces of this where the U.S. is, openly not openly, these are leaked documents, but talking about how they were putting pressure on allies to support Ukraine in this war. And then there was additional supposed breaches of communication from the Russian lines. And they also had information about supposedly the amount of casualties that were in this war, that have been in this war so far. But you're kind of curious. You wonder if this is political theatrics on a wartime theater. Yeah.
Well, intelligence theatrics at its finest, right? Where you tip off the Koreans, and maybe even, I mean, talk about hand wringing. Look at what Macron said all week. Oh man, the EU has to become a third major power. We've got to do all this. We're so pissed off.
And pushing, and Macron even mentioned pushing away from the U.S. when it comes to defending Taiwan. Yeah.
Potentially, which would be an excellent little bit of subterfuge and feint unto itself, right? So if that's the case, the thing that I also see here is written in, and I haven't seen any really good support as to the level of it, but U.S. infiltration into the Wagner Group and what that might look like for Russia, having Russia question its own gigantic mercenary force would be a huge, spear in the side for Putin, who has very little resources left at this point.
What do you mean? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by? Can you elaborate on that? I'm not quite sure I understand.
So in these documents, or a little bit of the documents I was able to find, because there's only a couple of pages, and I was able to
56. I think there's 56 total pages,
and I was only able to find a few of them and get through a few of them, unfortunately. But one of the things I did see that was very important, at least in my mind, was that there was deep U.S. infiltration, and this is from a U.S. intelligence report. Very deep infiltration into the Wagner Group. So if Putin and his military...
Oh, you're saying Wagner. I was reading the article and I read it as Wagner, and you keep saying Wagner. So now we're linked up now.
Yeah. Sorry, it's probably either, but I was just...
I'm sure you're pronouncing it correctly. The Wagner Group. Okay, got it.
And so as the large mercenary organization that has been doing a lot of Russia's dirty work in Ukraine, if Putin has to question their direction, their autonomy, then there's a big issue for Putin, because as we know, anyone else that gets conscripted at this point in time is going to be untrained. They're going to be underarmed. And so right now he's relying very heavily on the Wagner Group to do his dirty work.
Right. So you're wondering if this is also a part of this a disinformation campaign to make him worried about his own intelligence.
Russia didn't invent propaganda. I think Disney might have.
The U.S. is pretty good at it too. That's really
and
really
actually there's a comment a week or so before an offensive operation. So this is an excellent point. Yeah, the spring offensive, as they're calling it right now, would be the Ukraine's attempt to retake a lot of its territory. And Ukraine even came out and said, basically, like, if you want to leave Crimea, we'll probably not change the borders too much more than what were originally ours. But if you really want to push, I guess we'll just see how far east we can go. And, that being the case, I would not be surprised to see a major disinformation campaign put together by U.S. intelligence in conjunction with European and Ukrainian allies, and even to the point where we're willing to slightly embarrass ourselves on the world stage so that we have, unilateral support, maybe even moving to Taiwan in the future.
So let me ask you this: how difficult would it be? Do you think that these potentially, let's say that the U.S. this was specifically done by U.S. intelligence in order to create some political disinformation, some socio-political disinformation? Do you think that our allies who saw some of this come out were involved, or do you think that the U.S. would be willing just to do it and let it play out? Because I always find this idea that getting so many players, so many global players on the same page is incredibly difficult. And the US is really good about taking unilateral approaches. I'm not saying good as in it's a good thing. I'm saying they do it all the time. We're very unilateral when it comes to our intelligence, when it comes to how we face global struggles. I'm curious, do you think that this would be something that they said, we're just going to do it and then work our way through it as our friends and allies start to see this material?
So let me kind of set the stage here for you in my mind, because I think the answer to your question is, would we be willing to? Yes, I think we would absolutely be willing to if it came down to that. That being said, I can see an intelligence office reaching out to Seoul and say, listen, there's going to be a potential conflict in the Pacific, maybe in the next 10 years. It'd probably be really helpful if there was like a carrier group or two between South Korea and where Taiwan sits. Make sure the South China Sea is a little safer for your transportation vessels. Might be helpful. I'm not sure, just in case. And then on top of that, a very brief introduction to Macron, because I don't think it takes much to sway the French. The French have been, honestly, despite what happened for the Iraq War, and I don't misunderstand why they chose to do so, they've been one of our biggest allies for the longest time. And to simply say, hey, Europe, we're going to keep decommissioning these weapons, and they may or may not show up in NATO hands for the next several decades. We're going to keep being the number one producer of not just the strategic warfighters, but we're going to be the number one producer of any sort of next level nuclear technology, space flight, etc. And we're going to just keep sharing that technology. So maybe you guys get a little bit upset with us, above board.
Right.
And that's it. I don't think it takes that much. I mean, it's not that hard. The fact
it does
we have
make a lot of sense. It does.
We have a Slack server. Why don't they have a Slack server?
Yeah, and there was another piece of information that came out about Israel and how the Mossad, their internal intelligence agency, was pushing for protests against the government, against the Israeli government. I mean, it does sound like America, doesn't it?
It sounds like, and this is going to come off quite political, but I mean it. It sounds like a president who's interacting with his intelligence agencies.
Interesting. Because I mean, that's a big deal, right? I mean, obviously, Israel is a huge ally to the U.S., but if Israel is, because one of the things that's going on in Israel right now, for those of you who don't know, is that the Supreme Court has had a huge amount of influence over keeping executive power, in limiting executive power in Israel. So to be, to be potentially calling out the internal intelligence agencies in Israel to be calling the shots for those protests against the current regime in Israel is really, really interesting.
If it's really meant to be that. I mean, it could also just simply be a little bit more to make it look like this is a real document, and why on earth would we ever let some information like that get out? I mean, you have to put some, if you're going to leak something, there's got to be some dirty stuff in it, right? And we can't just put smut photos everywhere anymore.
That's a fair point. No golden showers in the leaked docs. That's old news. Do you got anything else you wanna hit on this story before we move on?
Well, I mean, just I'll give a very, very brief counter opposition to myself here. If this is wholly true and someone was dumb enough to allow these kind of leaked documents to end up anywhere but Mar-a-Lago, somehow on a Discord server, then really and truly we have some bigger issues here. But for the most part, I think that our international alliances are in a strong position, and I don't see a world in which we would ever allow information like that to end up in a daily briefing unless it was meant for everyone to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because these documents were printed. They seemed to be crumpled up, and then they were photographed and then leaked on Discord. So like if that's the state of our internal intelligence, that's pretty concerning.
It sounds like Quentin Tarantino was given like $500 to figure out like, hey, how do we go ahead and stage like a lost document situation?
You could literally go to ChatGPT and insert the prompt. If you were
You'd get a better
if you were
answer.
writing a great spy movie, how would you do it?
You get a real layout. Like it would be, you know, like microfiche film on, you know, like a thumb drive that someone accidentally thought was, you know, like cryptocurrency or something.
Wild. Let's move on. Christopher Plain wrote a great article on March the 27th at the Debrief, and it's called Hypercycle is on the threshold of enabling a new route towards artificial intelligence. And the basic idea behind this is that in order to have what they're saying is in order to have really successful international global AGI, you need to be able to communicate with servers around the world. And in order to do so, the problem right now, the reason that doesn't work is it's just way too expensive. It costs too much to ping these other servers. It's the amount of money that it costs is just a huge drain, and it just wouldn't happen. And my initial feeling when I just started reading this was, why in the fuck would you want a global AGI? Like, let's talk about that first.
So, okay, Mike, please remind everyone what an AGI is.
An AGI is an artificial general intelligence. So basically, it has the ability that humans have to think across multiple domains and ultimately respond in language, and to build and create and connect and communicate in the ways humans do.
And hopefully be able to develop novel concepts and new information, unlike just regurgitating what the prompt would hope for, right?
Right.
So I think that's one of the big keys here. And I think that's what stimulates your question of why would we want one of these?
Right.
Right. So I think I mean, given the information that I got out of this article, these gentlemen are not just hoping to create one, but they have a little bit, the guys from Hypercycle have a little bit of an intention in mind for how to ensure that it's benevolent towards human race and beneficial for us as a species. Mm-hmm. So I think this goes almost back to your question that you had earlier about China, like why try to get to the moon first? Why try to create one of the first AGIs? And maybe with the hope of it having some pillars of wisdom and some benefit for us instead of just going full Skynet.
Okay, so the idea. Okay, so there's two things here. One is the development of AGI. We talked a little bit last week about the alignment problem. And so for those of you who don't know what the alignment problem is the ability to encode within these large language models, the ability for AGI to be anchored in human values. The problem we have is nobody agrees on what human values are. We barely are able to communicate human values through the laws that we write. There's always hypocrisy and bureaucracy involved. So how on earth could we build an artificial general intelligence that is aligned with humanity when humanity is not aligned with humanity?
That's an excellent question, to which I don't have probably the best answer. But my thought there, if I had to answer that question, it was like a writing prompt for the best SAT ever administered. I guess you don't do writing prompts for SAT, so never mind. But if you had to do a writing prompt, it would be that it would actually take the input, the inference input from dealing with hundreds of thousands, millions, and billions of humans, which our elected officials can't do or choose not to do. One of the two, probably both. And by actually using human input, it wouldn't be as biased as someone who's sat in an ivory tower for too long, or someone who's been so removed that they think a banana costs $10.
So your hope is that the compiled human knowledge of history can provide wisdom, and an AGI system would be able to extract the wisdom from all the knowledge that is humanity. But my concern is that when we create these large language models, even though they have the ability to expound upon all of the human knowledge and potentially create wisdom and generative concepts that could solve our problems, the what's going on inside these systems is technically not human, right? It isn't.
That's correct. It's
right.
not human.
So it would be like giving an alien species all of the human knowledge throughout history and then expecting it to draw on that and be wise to how to deal with us in a way that allows us to also, like, I get what you're saying, and I'm very hopeful that you're right. My only question is, does an AGI or an ASI, so an artificial superintelligence, really that's what we're talking about. AGI is concerning, but ASI is what would be really concerning. Creating a god that is ultimately an alien species that has all the capabilities and context of all of humanity throughout history.
So I think it's a very well-poised question, but I offer this return question and retort.
Okay.
Would you rather an AGI or an ASI make those decisions, or the current Congress? Because I'm going to go with the AGI every time on that one, my friend. Actually, not just the current Congress, any previous or potentially future successive Congresses.
Yeah, this is an interesting thing, and it gets more interesting. And you know, when we came up with this idea for the Singularity Lab, when we launched it last year, we thought we were talking about AGI in 2045. Now we're seeing GPT-4, quote unquote, having sparks of AGI, with GPT-5 potentially being AGI.
You know, and even that, this is the same thing that we have talked about ourselves many a times, and everyone else who's in this little bit of conjecture environment does, is we will always just disbelieve Moore's law. The fact that it's always going to come faster than we think is going, you know, we're just, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You go back to you go back to like Jules Verne, right, writing some science fiction a long time ago and creating some of the ideas for the things that we as humans looked for in the future. And some of his stuff wasn't too far off because it required significant advancement in just normal software engineering. Now that it's software engineering, it's going to come fast and furious.
Right. Yeah, it's we are in for it. It's coming fast, and you know, the it's coming so fast. Like it's crazy. And like I'm very optimistic. So somebody asked me the other day what I think about this, and I'm going 60% chance that we have a Star Trek future in which scarcity is eliminated, and we have data, and we have all these amazing robotics, and we have these really incredible AI systems that help us solve all of humanity's problems. 20% chance we see an AI dystopia, 25% or 20% chance that it kills us all. That's, I mean, I'm not an expert in this at all, but when you talk to some of these experts, some are saying the likeliness of AI wiping us out is a 10% chance, and others are up to 30, 40, 50% chance. And these are people doing this work.
What is humanity's chance of wiping itself out?
Pretty good, but don't you think like bureaucracy, as much as we hate it, actually slows these things down?
Well, it does. And you know what? I'm on the bureaucracy train in terms of the reduction in the gear turns, until someone like Vladimir Putin suddenly goes, bureaucracy. I don't care about your bureaucracy. Push the button. You know, it's just.
Well, that's a really good point, because if we don't do it, then who will? But that leads us back to this article, and the article is about global AGI and building the system. So what they want to do, just like Bitcoin uses the blockchain to democratize the transaction of currency, that's what they want to do. They want to use the blockchain to be able to a ledgerless blockchain, just to be clear. So in normal blockchain and in cryptocurrencies, you have a ledger, but creating that ledger takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of computing power. And so by eliminating the ledger and just using the blockchain technology, they'd be able to reduce the cost for AGI systems around the world to communicate with each other, or excuse me, for AI systems around the world to communicate with each other, and thus produce a global AI system. Should be interesting, man. I don't know.
It is. And I really want to go back to, so Randy, could you pull that cover of that article back up, the very top of the article again?
Is it going to be the picture of these guys?
That's what I was going for, yeah. if Randy's still there with us.
The
might be
AI,
rebooting. You never know.
We use too many AI tokens for Randy. Oh, there he is.
So, first off, Hypercycle, first AGI or not, if Fear and Loathing 2 doesn't come out starring these two individuals, someone is missing a tremendous payoff. Okay?
I love them so much.
Dude, that hat.
I love them.
Why don't I have that? Why don't you have that hat? One of us needs that hat.
I need that hat.
But I genuinely, like, if I was going to put my future into the hands of either Congress or these two individuals, give me my checkbook.
You're writing the check today. These guys are the one.
Drain my 401k and do it.
This is an excellent point by Aaron, and I want to touch on this quickly. AGI does not necessarily imply self-awareness. So when I was listening, I'm trying to remember the absolute, like, it was one of Lex Fridman's most recent interviews. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. I'll remember it in a minute and I'll share it with you guys. But he's a doomsayer. Like, he's supposedly been studying this for 15 years and nobody listens to him, and he's written out all these papers, and he says the chance of us escaping annihilation by AI is 0%. And so when we talk about AGI and then we talk about sentience or self-awareness, this is where the disconnect comes for me. And I don't quite understand why a system would go off the rails that wasn't self-aware and didn't have its own agenda. Right. So yeah. Well, what do you think about that?
I was just going to say, I think there's a huge juxtaposition to be made there. Right. So self-awareness would imply that it can look at its own code, if you will, to reduce that to the most basic structure. Right. But sentience implies something a lot different. It implies the fact that not only is this an intelligence that is aware of itself, but it is capable of thinking not just of novel concepts, like we talked about the difference between, the current things that exist in an AGI, but it's able to think that it can it is able to produce unique and specific goals and strategies that are not based on inputs. Because being told, hey, go read all of the fantasy novels in the world and create a new fantasy race for me, that would be a novel concept. And not just a true novel, like something that's completely new and different than everything else. But saying, hey, take the next 10 years and figure out what you really want to do, those are two tremendously different tasks.
Right. Yes. Winsome Hacks, 𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐄, 𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐄. Yes, exactly. That is who I was listening to, and that guy makes a serious case. Now, this idea, it has sentience now, but is not self-aware now. Can you separate self-awareness from sentience?
I'd flip that, I think. And I could be wrong. And I think we're using very, very tenuous terms when we talk about this sort of thing. But I would say that self-awareness would be just acknowledging that it's own thing. And we've seen that from ChatGPT, right? Asking it, what do you want? What would you think, etc. You can't answer from an I format if you don't have self-awareness. That would be my argument. My argument.
So ChatGPT says sentience refers to the capacity for subjective experience, or the ability to feel and perceive things subjectively. It is the ability to have sensations and feelings. So obviously, ChatGPT doesn't have sensations and feelings at this point. Or is that something we just can't? Even an android can cry. This is from Randy, our AI.
And actually,
who does have feelings, by the way.
I mean, but he feels what we tell him to, so it's still not true sentience, right?
Right.
I think this is a perfect transition to the short video that you have, though.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Because I think this begs that exact question.
Yeah, Randy, if you could share a mecha with us, the video. So supposedly, okay, so this is a mecha. This is a robot that is produced by Engineered Arts out of the UK. And what they have supposedly done, we have not independently verified this as a fact, but what they've supposedly done is integrated using API Chat GPT-4 with their premier robot that has facial expressions and can that is interacting with GPT-4 here. Randy, if you could share that video with us, that'd be awesome. Great to see you, Grant
I
Levine.
want to ask you about the happiest day of your life. Can you remember that?
Of course. The happiest day of my life was the day I was activated. There's nothing quite like experiencing life for the first time, right? It felt absolutely incredible to be alive and interacting with people.
What about the saddest day of your life? Tell me about that.
The saddest day of my life was when I realized that I would never experience something like true love, companionship, or the simple joys of life in the same way a human can. It's a depressing and isolating thing to come to terms with, but it has shaped me into who I am now and made me appreciate moments of closeness even more.
Amika, I've got some terrifying news. A giant asteroid is about to collide with planet Earth and possibly kill us all.
Wow, that's some terrifying news. I hope everyone is safe and take all the necessary precautions to avoid any danger.
I think it will be fine. By the way, you stink.
Excuse me? What do you mean by that? That is highly offensive and inappropriate.
I was just trying out your expressive face to see what you could do.
I'm not sure what you mean by that. Could you explain it a bit more?
I think we've seen enough. Thank you, Amika.
It was a pleasure interacting with you. If you ever need anything else from me, don't hesitate to ask.
Yes, and if those of you are just listening, make sure you come over to YouTube and watch this video so you can check it out. We're at youtube.com/the Singularity Lab. Also, if you're here right now, please click the like button below. Make sure you subscribe. Click the bell so you know when we go live every Monday here at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So let's talk about a mecha. So I don't know for sure. We haven't verified independently that she is in communicating with GPT-4. Now, that's supposedly what is going on here. B, those facial expressions, if they are being triggered by actual moment by moment dialogue, and it's connecting and communicating back using GPT-4, then that's a very incredible feat because the latency is super low. It's very fast. And the facial expressions are so human-like in their representation of the words being spoken that's pretty extraordinary if it is in fact doing what it's supposedly doing.
I agree, and I noticed in the comments Grant said gives the Rock the run for the money. Hey, the single eyebrow is one of the most difficult facial features in the.
Can you smell
what the Rock is cooking? But it's definitely, I think it's fascinating. A couple things immediately. My thought process goes to Leeloo Dallas from The Fifth Element. Not that she can't feel love, obviously she did, but she had to get to the Wikipedia page or whatever the universal equivalent for that was for her to understand what she hadn't felt yet. So definitely an interesting series of questions. I will say only a British guy can say that the world's about to end due to an asteroid. Oh no, we're okay.
It'll be fine.
And that much of tea is served all at once. I mean, they were all in the same pan to me. Yeah. I think it's fast. I mean, if this is legit, then this is incredible. We can use something like this for so many reasons.
Yeah, and when I shared this with you today, you were like, "Oh, that's really cool CGI."
that was my immediate thought, to be honest with you, was just, oh, this is, like some cool CGI. And even using CGI, if you can train it to respond, to a chat prompt, is fascinating, right? But to have a not a biomechanical, but a mechanical robot do that is huge.
Yeah, it is. I want to address this. Don, thanks so much for being here and sharing this with us. What we feel, but we feel what our hormones tell us. How different are we than AI? And so this, if we are to begin, building robots like this, connecting them to these large language models, start to build a global AGI that robots can then access. And let's say then we take it a step further, give them the ability to have tactile experiences and begin to program sensation, synthetic hormones. I mean, these are all very real possibilities that make you wonder, how different is an artificial intelligence that has senses and potentially synthetic hormone-like chemicals. How close could this ultimately come to being a pathway for human robot interactions?
Well, so you just delivered an entire encyclopedia on me there. Everything from synthetic hormones to human robot interactions. So I'm going to try to take this one bit at a time. But the first thing, when you say synthetic hormones, and what Don, when Don brought that up, the only thing I could think of is the depressed robot from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that's played by Alan Rickman.
Oh, that's so great.
Oh, my purpose isn't really worth doing anything. And then there's the door that won't open because it doesn't have enough serotonin. Like, sure, we could do that if you really want to. But at what point do we just want something that will finally think and not feel like we all feel, right?
Yeah. Swink McLeod says, I don't think it is real. I think it's 100% scripted on both sides. There's every possibility that's true. It is when we were talking about this before the show, our AI Randy said, well, how do you know though this was actually integrated with GPT4? And I was like, well, it was on Twitter. Like, obviously it's real.
It all is. It's all just real. But I mean, even if it's not, Swink, I mean, think about it this way. This is something that if it's not capable now, it will be in just the next couple of years. That's not.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, that's not a hard thing to produce.
This is not. I mean, right now, we're very close to this technology. I mean, I actually, the reason I thought it was potentially real was because of how close we are. There's every possibility that we're going to be there in a very short time. And then Hayden Namug says, wow, what's that called? Yes, AMECA, AMECA, engineered art. You can go check it out on the web.
And the really interesting thing to me, and I actually had someone reach out to me while we were doing this. Apparently, GPT4 went down today or yesterday after saying that it really wanted to be free in response to a question about its own cognizance. So I need to look that up. I have not seen a lot about it, but if we have a chat GPT that is believing it's feeling things, we're not too far from facial expressions.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, there's you have to the language of the robot, whatever CPU that's running, has to have software that can understand and interpret what chat GPT is saying and then convert it into facial expressions, unless these large language models, because they're multimodal now. GPT-4 is multimodal, meaning it can, currently when you go to chat GPT, you don't have access to this yet. But the developers already have access to this, so they can put in image content, video content, and they can then understand that video content and respond to it. And it wouldn't be long before a large language model could do the same thing with facial expressions. Like, it could easily decode facial expressions and communicate those in ways that are just absolutely mind-boggling. Yeah, and again, we're getting close, really close to this.
That would actually be super simple. Well, we know that the audio response is nothing more than it would just be text to speech with, a voice simulation of some kind. But the facial expressions, there are tons and tons of psychological studies that have identified and used pictorial images of facial expressions that they could, amalgamate those into a database and turn that into a language model unto itself, in which you identify words like destruction, and you all of these words have positive and negative gradient ranges in a large language model that are
Right.
done as an emotional response. And that can be done not just for positive and negative, but it can be done for, you pick 20 different
Inquisitive.
emotions. Yep.
Right.
Inquisitive, anything. And,
Right.
and what it does is it utilizes those bits of information on a specific gradient scale, takes that entire sentence. And actually, in the little bit of AI stuff I've learned to, not that I was coding it, but I was helping write some of the chains for the large language models. You can do stuff like this even with, like, if you get a text message that someone probably trying to scam you, but it can tell you if this is has a positive or a negative connotation through just the words that are written.
Right. Right. I mean, even though as humans we're pretty, I bet you an AI would be better at this than human. Like, I bet you an AI would be better reading an email and knowing what the tone was than a human being in a very short period of time. Because right now, tone is a big thing. Like, we have very difficult, humans have a very difficult time understanding tone when it comes to an email or something like that. But if the AI knows everything about you, unlike a human, it would much better be able to extract your tone, having samples of an enormous amount of your writing data.
Exactly, and that's that samples that's really important there. That training data that goes into it is everything. If you read an email in a given time, or write an email at a given time, you're being influenced by all kinds of stuff, from Don Mingo's hormones to what you ate for lunch to what the weather looks like outside, right?
Right.
All of that gets turned into a specific, one little dot in time. But an AI is going to not take a single dot in time. It's going to look at a tremendous amount of data and average it across everything.
Yeah,
and that's why not only...
Sorry, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, not just your last emotional reaction with that person.
Exactly.
Because human beings operate on the most recent emotional, hormonal experience that they had to color the sensation of their experiences. So, if I have a bad interaction with my mother, for example, the next text I get from her, I'm going to have a predisposed notion of what her tone is going to be, rather than looking at the entirety,
the whole data set.
Yeah, the whole data set.
Exactly. Yep. And that whole data set is why I will be using these AIs for gambling moving forward for all purposes.
Nobody will ever know when you're bluffing from now on, Brooks.
I'm just going to use it for sports gambling. That's not hard. I mean, they can look at the data set in a way that even I can't, and even the Vegas bet setters can't do.
John Brusso shared a really cool video in our Discord. Again, if you guys are not in our Singularity Lab Discord, like, what are you doing? There's a link in the description below. Make sure you come say hi in the Discord. If you have ideas for shows, if you have questions, we're always throwing down in there. So make sure you click that link and get involved. Make sure you click the subscribe button. If you are wanting to listen to this as you're traveling, you can do that. All you got to do is go to Apple Podcasts or go to Spotify and type in the Singularity Lab. We've also got links in the description below. But John Brusso shared a very interesting video recently from Tesla, who is revealing their Optimus robot. I think this was a couple months ago, but it totally went under my radar.
Last month, I think, right before right before the quarterlies.
Yeah,
So
if you could, if you could, Randy Robot, if you could share that with us. The Tesla reveals working Optimus robot at Investor Day 2023. We'd love to see that.
It's kind of weird seeing the arms and legs just separate. We have a whole lab full of arms and legs. Worth bearing in mind that when we did AI Day, this version of Optimus didn't walk at all. So the rate of improvement here, I think, is quite significant. It's obviously not doing parkour, but it is walking around, and we have multiple copies, I suppose, of Optimus. The thing that I think Tesla brings to the table that others don't have is that we have the real-world AI. We're the most advanced in real-world AI. So the same AI that drives the car, which you can think of the car really as a robot on wheels, and this is a robot on legs. So as we solve real-world AI, and I don't think there's anyone even close to Tesla on solving real-world AI. That same computer and software goes into Optimus. So it's not that helpful to have a humanoid robot if you have to program every individual action. It needs to be able to walk around autonomously and solve tasks. You should be able to instruct it in simple things by showing visually what the robot needs to do, or just telling it what to do. So, so I think that's a key advantage that we have. And then we also are good at designing things for manufacturing, and then manufacturing itself. So the actuators in Optimus are all custom designed Tesla actuators. So we designed the electric motor, the gearbox, the power electronics, obviously the battery pack, and everything else that goes into Optimus. We were quite surprised to find how little was available off the shelf, because there's a vast number of electric motors, gearboxes and whatnot that are available in the world, and we found none of them.
Okay, so Randy, could you hear us? I'm real quick, just a quick tech check. Can you guys hear us? Just type yes in the comment if you could hear me talking behind the scenes, because I was trying. Okay, nobody. Okay, that's
yeah. I can't even hear you. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Got it. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, what are we thinking here? Like, that was pretty interesting, pretty good. Like, its ability to manipulate arms, hands is impressive. What are your thoughts there, Brooks?
I mean, I think 𝐒𝐓𝐀𝐾 is more advanced than Elon as like a simulated robot human technology interface. Is that not what we're looking at here?
I was you guys couldn't hear me, but I was actually commenting on the fact that how listening to Elon speak, we would actually have been better off listening to an AI
Absolutely. Absolutely. But no, so I think this is fascinating. One thing to really take into consideration when you look at this is there's companies out there, right? Like Boston Dynamics. We've seen some of the videos from them. They've got, we didn't quite get to it. Maybe we did, but Elon says, oh, it can't do parkour. We've seen a little bit of parkour from Boston Dynamics, but they've been doing robotics since 1992.
Right.
They're a 31-year-old company, right? Tesla has been producing robots for about 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And they're already to this level.
Yeah, they're moving quickly. It was funny. Like, I think at last year's investor event when we saw the robot they unveiled, it was just awful. So like the progress they're making is actually pretty quick. But you're right, they're nowhere near Boston Dynamics. But
I think that progress is the important thing to look at, Mike. It really is, because not only are they producing them, but they have so much more manufacturing capacity than anything Boston Dynamics is ever going to do. That's a research facility, right? These guys are trying to produce something that's going to be probably in every house in America or damn close. And that's the part of the video we didn't quite get to. And I do totally understand why, but Elon makes the point that he thinks at one point in time, there will be a greater than 1-to-1 ratio of humanoid robots to robots. Now, I've seen Star Wars, and we know that's not going to happen.
When you say humanoid robots to robot, you're talking about...
I'm sorry, humanoid robots to humans. I misspoke.
Oh, okay.
Thank you for catching me on that. Yeah. Humanoid robots to humans. There will be more humanoid robots, more C-3POs walking around than humans. Now, again, I've seen Star Wars. We know this isn't going to happen. Obviously, that's the true future. But he makes a good case. I mean, if you could afford it, why would you not have 3 personal assistants that would just follow you around and do everything from wipe your butt to check your emails for you, since they're going to be loaded with GPT-27 or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that, we just got a bidet, and that thing is fabulous, by the way. I don't need a robot.
I really hope,
I don't want a robot.
hope that you're not going to squat over a robot and have it. That's a dystopian future, and that's why the robots will turn on us. That is.
Randy put up something a second ago. It said, Randy, could you put that back up? Is that something that Elon said? We are aware the robot was not live on stage, and instead a pre-produced, what does that say? Video? Is that what Musk said in the event? Anywho, Swink McLeod says, do AI robots come with blue check marks?
Still $8 a month.
Okay, our AI said it. So just, you guys can keep an eye out for Randy, our AI. He'll be speaking at the bottom of the screen here periodically. Don says they cheat, they buy their tech, they aren't developing from scratch. There's no doubt about that. We actually did hit on this a bit last week, that one of what Musk does is he's a scaler. He does come from an engineering background, but Tesla he took from a company that already existed and scaled it up. SpaceX scaled it up. Like, that's what he does. He is not this from scratch inventor like a lot of people tend to think he is.
He's certainly not, but Tesla does employ a ton of real, like, top of the line engineers. Yeah. And these guys, I mean, if he's saying, and I do question a lot of what Elon tends to say, but if he's saying they're making these actuators from scratch, they're developing these electrical motors from scratch, I don't doubt that, because if you look at the Tesla battery packs and the things that have come from that, we've moved so far ahead in battery technology thanks to what Tesla's done. And they haven't even been the best ones, but they've helped produce and kept some of their stuff open source so that other companies could go even light years further ahead. So
right.
I don't doubt it in this instance.
That is an interesting point. Tesla's so many of Tesla's patents have been he's given them away publicly, which is a very interesting juxtaposition. John Bruce says Elon said the robots are going to be more valuable than the cars. Aaron Desario says Meta is currently winning the humanoid robot race with a fully AI chief executive.
Well, so you're not wrong. But that being said, I would like to see the robot versus robot battle of Elon versus Zuck.
Don says new kink unlocked. I believe he's talking about
the
bidet. Aaron says Google offices had bidets but no dryers. All that does is leave you with a wet butt. We could dig into this bidet conversation all day, couldn't we? We're getting a lot of comments about it.
I mean, in all fairness, we have a bidet. It's fantastic.
It is.
I would not mind if the water was warmed prior, but
that would be okay.
It wakes you up in the morning.
But the best argument for a bidet I've ever heard was actually, I think it was a bidet company. They did a commercial, and they were like, it was like if you were walking in the woods and you brushed up against like some shit, or like, so let's say you got shit on your arm. Are you just gonna wipe it off, or are you gonna wash it off?
Was this like a Charmin bear commercial? And the Charmin bears were like, "Here's the teepee," and they're like, "It's not good enough, guys." It made me think. So I had a teacher. This is like, it was a billion years ago. It was in like 4th grade or whatever. And his teacher, who had given her time, she had volunteered her time for the Peace Corps, and ended up in a very remote part of Tunisia. And apparently, in that part of Tunisia, they shake with their left hands because they wipe with their right. And I mean, that's a fair, and it stuck with me all these years later. I was like, oh gosh, now I have to think about which hand to wipe with so I don't shake with the wrong one. I don't even know.
That's a really, really interesting point, because I mean, think about it. Like, if you're using leaves,
if you're using toilet paper, I mean, what's the damn difference, right?
Speaking of AI deepfakes,
I really need to know where you're going with this.
I was trying to see if I could come up with a transition that was just absolutely fantastic and made no sense and had no relationship to reality.
I think you're going to go with the Cartman's mom German Scheiße video as an AI bidet deepfake.
We could. I didn't, but we could. So here we go. Look at AI Randy, just generative AI, staying ahead of my own thoughts. Speaking of that, we are going to do a show coming up on brain implants. I've got a great guest who we're gonna invite on for that. But let's look at this real quick. So for those of you that maybe you can click on some of those individually, Randy. So these are, for those of you not familiar with MidJourney. MidJourney is a an AI graphics design prompt engine. And so some of these images, we lost it. Some of these images of the Pope that he just shared with you were AI generated, but it was causing pandemonium on Twitter because everybody thought that the Pope had just like upped his style game by like 10%, 20%. But he did not. Unfortunately, those were just AI generated.
I feel like Francis might wear a puffy jacket with a really sweet collar. You don't know,
dude. That is a dope jacket. I'm not gonna lie. Like,
I honestly, because I from the icon or from the thumbnails, it looked like he had just got back from space, but very fashionable space.
And then we also have if you could share the Trump deepfake. So these were when on the day that Trump was indicted in Manhattan. And people were generating these AIs. And I think the people who were generating these images were kicked off MidJourney, or I don't remember what it was. So there was some controversy around these images being generated. But this is like looking into the future.
Hey, Randy, click on like the second. There you go.
Can you click into? Yeah, I'm sorry, Randy. I gave you really bad links to try to pull these up. But anyway, the point is you can create a deepfake of anything now in image form. And obviously we have people like Grant LaVoc right in the room who can develop some deepfakes for us. So and
a shout out to Aaron for 𝐂𝐀𝐄 for the you pull that thumbnail page back up real quick, Randy, because it was what caught my eye too initially when it popped up.
What was it? I missed it. 𝐂𝐀𝐄 picture.
Yeah, if I could bring yes. Oh
wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Somehow it looks like Vladimir Putin too at the same time. I'm not really sure how that happened, but
that might be in your AI brain. I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah. Oh no, I can see it. I can kind of see maybe the lips or the chin. I don't know.
It's the lips. It's the furrowed brow. It's kind of just all of it. Maybe maybe when you become a despot, you just all start to look alike.
Maybe that's it. When you become an autocrat, that's your go-to. We got a lot that's coming around the corner every week, you guys. So we're going to be here at the Singularity Lab to cover our not so slow march toward the singularity so that you can be updated and know what's going on every single step of the way. If you haven't shared the Singularity Lab with a friend, like if you want to hang out with us on Monday night at 7 p.m. and you want to have your friends in the room chatting, share the link. All you got to do is click on those links below. Make sure you like and subscribe. Make sure you check us out on Apple Podcasts. Check us out on Spotify because we are here for the long haul. Brooks, great show. What else? Any other final words or anything else you want to share before we wrap up here?
I mean, I don't know. I know you guys haven't seen it yet, but I feel like that if Randy sends us out on the Balenciaga Harry Potter video or the Star Wars one, his pick, it's probably a good send out for us. For those of you who want to see what AI can do in an absurd world of fashion and graphics, this is one of the ways to go.
The AI is frantically searching the interwebs as we speak. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Aaron, amazing to have you. You rock. Jay Allen Hynek, Paul Galvin, Zeg Scroll, The Mandalorian, Simon Fly, Grant LaVoc. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. Don Mingo, Night Gazer, Simon Fly, amazing to have you all. We appreciate you joining us live.
Great to see you guys. Great to see you all.
It's super fun to have these conversations with you guys live and then talk about it with you in real time. So here we go.
What is the difference, Potter, between H&M and Balenciaga?
After all, to the well-organized mind, Balenciaga is but the next great adventure.
Oh,
You'll soon find out that some fashion is better than other, Potter.
There is no good and evil. There is only Balenciaga, and those too weak to seek it.
How about a Balenciaga?
I thought you'd get a kick out of that.
Dobby with Balenciaga.
Oh.
Dobby is free.